The dust is settling on another productive Seahawks draft, and Seattle's performance is receiving widespread acclaim. Joining us to give his thoughts on each of the picks and the class as a whole is author, draft guru, and NFL editor for USA Today, Doug Farrar. Let's light him up. I'm Jackson Bevins, and this is Cigar Thoughts. Welcome back to the Cigar Lounge. I am Jackson Bevins, and along with my persnickety producer, Mike Barwin, this is a very special edition of the Cigar Thoughts podcast. Mike, how are we doing today?
We're doing great, Jackson. We're 1 week removed from the NFL draft, and I am well in the throes of convincing myself that the Seahawks went 10 for 10 drafting Hall of Famers. So it's all gravy over here, baby. How are you?
Oh, man. You know, honestly, I might not go that far, but now that we've had a week to think about it, I'm still feeling pretty good about how things went. It was a draft where Pete Carroll and John Schneider clearly targeted guys who they felt were the best players available as opposed to drafting for need. And while that was to the chagrin of many, I do see wisdom in that process. And it's a thought I want to dig into more, and we have the perfect guest to help us do that today. But before we do, I want to remind everyone listening that the official Cigar Thoughts cigars are now available for purchase at cigarthoughtsnfl.com. Direct links to order them will be in the notes on the show page as well, so feel free to click that from whichever platform you're listening on. As we announced earlier in the week, these cigars are made from a blend of premier Dominican tobacco leaf that has been aged 13 years and are available to Cigar Thoughts listeners for less than half of their normal MSRP. Do it for yourself and do it to help support the show. The delivery is speedy, and we've already received some really impressive feedback from those of y'all who have bought them, so thank you for that. It means the world to us. Now, I mentioned that we have an esteemed guest with us today. He joined us last year after the draft to break down Seattle's sensational 2022 class, and he's back in the lounge to do it again. He is the NFL editor for USA Today, wields All-Pro and MVP votes each season, and is the author of the brilliant book, The Genius of Desperation. Mr. Doug Farrar, thanks for coming in.
Hey guys, welcome back. I'm your guest. I'm not welcoming me. I feel like I've aged 13 years with this draft, but yeah, thank you for having me, and congratulations on the cigars.
Hey, thank you so much,
idea.
Man. Yeah,
an idea whose time has come. Clearly,
yeah. I hope so. It's we're off to a good start. Something I'm very excited about. So I appreciate you saying that, Doug. You were the guy we wanted to have on first after this draft, especially just because how insightful you were into last year's class when the Seahawks were coming off of a stretch of about 5 years of really not nailing it. And
Fugly draft. Fugly.
Yeah, yes, that's it. And you were pretty bullish on it, and you ended up being right. I think in hindsight, maybe the Jets are the only other team whose class could compete with the Seahawks last year. And we're going to dig into each of the Seahawks draft picks momentarily. But Doug, I want to start by focusing on the philosophy behind Seattle's 2023 draft class. All the talk leading up to the event was how much Seattle needed defensive line help, as well as fortifying the interior of the offensive line. And in fact, the Vegas lines were prohibitively in favor of the Seahawks going D-line with their first pick. But instead, they used their massive first-round capital to select a corner and a wide receiver. Given that Devin Witherspoon and Jaxon Smith-Njigba were close to consensus as the best at their positions in the class, do you feel that this was a case of the Seahawks taking the best player available as opposed to, quote, drafting for need? And if so, how do you feel about that approach?
Well, I think smart teams get the best player available for need. I think it's not one thing or the other. You combine them, but they didn't need a third receiver more than they needed a center or interior defensive line help or linebacker or
Certainly.
Whatever. So when Jaxon Smith-Njigba is there as the 20th pick, and you're like, oh, I can get this, this like the new Cooper Kupp, then you do it. Do we need another running back? Well, of course we need another running back because we're the Seahawks. Do we need another edge guy? Probably we have three, so maybe we need. So they went best player available in their minds. I think during the bad draft stretches, they went best player available in their minds a lot. They weren't firing on the right cylinders with the philosophy. And I asked both Pete and John at the combine in early March, why was without saying, hey, these 5 drafts sucked, because they're not going to answer the question if I ask them that. They know.
Yeah.
They're smart guys. They know they blew it. And I found the answers interesting and enlightening. And in the days leading up to the draft, I was kind of thinking about what especially Carroll said to me in response. And I thought, they're not taking Jalen Carter. Jalen Carter is a generational. He reminds me of Chris Jones, not when Chris Jones came out of college, but Chris Jones now. Like, he's Chris Jones now.
Wow.
If he's ding proof, they would probably have had to trade up to get him. But the more I thought about the way they're doing it now and the way they're committed to doing it, both Carroll and Schneider, no, they're not going to take him. So when they took Witherspoon, I know a lot of people were surprised they took Witherspoon at 5. I wasn't surprised at all, because they were, they wanted the best player left on their boards, and it didn't surprise me at all that Witherspoon was the guy. I think if you factor in Carter's questions, Devin Witherspoon is the best defensive player in this draft. Not the best corner, the best defensive player.
Wow.
And if you take quarterbacks out of the equation, he might be the best player overall.
Holy cow.
I was incredibly, the more I watched, the more I was just like, this guy, whoa, he's just special.
Wow.
So,
what did Pete Carroll say to you when you asked him about those 5 draft classes that made you think, you know what, this is not going to be Carter here?
I'll run the direct quote. He said, we really wanted guys who could handle it because we knew they would have a chance to play. It was really important to us, their character and their confidence in themselves. The way they came across with that, we were picking them for those spots, hoping it would work out, and it did. This is talking about last year. Perfect group of guys in the makeup and mentality that they brought to us. We're always trying to get more accurate in what we're doing. We really find that the character and the makeup part of it was crucial, and we continue to look at that. And Schneider talked about being Catholic, so he beats himself up a lot. His quote, not mine. Send the angry letters to the VMAC, not to Cigar Thoughts. Some of the background Schneider says some of the background information we had on players from a confidence standpoint or a swagger standpoint weren't necessarily able to compete with the Shermans and Chancellors and Wagners and KJ Wrights, Earl Thomas. They weren't getting guys who could compete with those guys. They thought they could reach because they had this, one of the 4 or 5 best defenses of all time. So, and the offense was locked in. So they kind of figured they could fart around and, make interesting picks and get cute. And they realized now, no, we're not that team anymore. So, reflecting on all that, they're not taking Carter, no matter I don't care how good he is. And he's tremendous. He's an amazing player. The tape is preposterous.
It is.
But I knew at that point, and you look at what was they have a little icon for the tough, like the hammer, is it?
Yeah.
The hammer, they had like hammers by all their guys, and you can watch, certainly the 4 guys, especially we're going to talk about. Yes, they're all hammers. They're all tough guys. They all bring it all the time, and you add these players to what they did last year, and it's hard not to be excited with, the change in philosophy. What I said last year on your show is that they spent those first few years building the LOB and getting Marshawn in a lowball trade and getting Russ. And they spent so much time getting undervalued assets as opposed to overrated projects. And they kind of went back to that. I think they went back to it in this draft too. And I think anytime you do that, you identify your undervalued assets. That's pure money ball. I mean, what's not to like?
Yeah. Well, let's start with Devin Witherspoon. I mean, that is high praise that you gave. Yep. And we had teased the possibility of Witherspoon at 5 about a month ahead of time. And then you didn't hear anything really connecting him to Seattle, and it was almost a foregone conclusion that Detroit was going to take him. And I think that's kind of what led to Detroit scrambling right afterwards. I think they were a bit blindsided by that. But I think so. The more that you look into this kid, the more of his tape you watch, the more of the stats you look at, the more of the interviews you hear with him, it becomes clearer and clearer why they took him. When you were getting ready for the draft and really digging into all these guys, what were your impressions of Devin Witherspoon? And then how do you feel about Seattle using such a high pick on him?
Well, I find it interesting that Pete compared him to Troy Polamalu. The only other guy I was like, gosh, 6 or 7 years ago, I was doing a piece on Earl Thomas. I think it was at Sports Illustrated at the time. And I asked Pete about Earl, and one thing he said is that, like, the value of Earl. And one question Pete asked me, he has answered the question with a question. When was the last time you saw anyone throw a post on us? I'm like, okay, fair enough. Well, you remember in that Panthers game that when Earl got hurt and Cam Newton threw a 60-yard post
to Ted Ginn
the next play?
Immediately.
Yeah, next play.
Yep.
The other thing Pete said is, and it was the first time I'd ever heard him compare anyone to Polamalu, was Earl Thomas. And just, an absolute frantic guy on the field, but he always knew where he was going. It was like this controlled aggression. Witherspoon, almost 6 feet, 181, so he's not sea hockey, whatever that means. I don't care. I had heard dings like he gets beaten deep, and okay, I guess you can watch cornerback tape and any quarterback like beaten deep once, but quarterbacks targeted Witherspoon 15 times on passes of 20 more air yards last season. They completed 1 for 39 yards, no touchdowns, 2 interceptions.
Wow.
Passer rating on passes of 20 more air yards, 0.0.
That's ludicrous, man.
Mr. Blutarski, 0.0.
Wow.
The thing that really stood out to me for a cornerback of his size and 6 foot is that's about the point where you start to get a little limited in your ability to match and transition with smaller, quicker, more angular receivers. He has the aggressiveness and the body type of a 6 foot corner. He has the match feet of a guy who's like 5'9" or 5'10", like a Trey Hodges Tomlinson or Clark Phillips, who are smaller guys and went much later. But he's got, because we talk about the aggression and he's got that dog in him, and sure,
oh, he's a hitter, man.
He is a hitter. But the thing that really impressed me was how well he could dance with receivers, match all the way through, foot for foot, move for move. And that was the thing that really stood out above everything else. My comp for him was Sam Madison. I've heard the Denzel Ward comps. I think they're informative. What I wrote was selected by the Dolphins in the second round of the 97 draft out of Louisville. Madison transcended any concern about his size, 5'11", 180, with great movement skills and the toughness to take any receiver right to the woodshed. Madison parlayed all that into 4 Pro Bowl appearances and 2 All-Pro nominations. Witherspoon seems to have the tools to possibly put up an equivalent NFL career given the right home. This is the right home.
Yeah, no kidding.
I mean, he is absolutely, whether we talk about him as sea hockey given his size, he is absolutely the type of player that both Carroll and Schneider were talking about at the Combine. Like, we have to have these types of guys. We have to have guys that we can put hammers on. And he's unquestionably that.
Wow. I want to get your thoughts on something, Doug, because, there's no question Seattle has lacked any sort of consistent pass rush for years now. And that need has never been more apparent than it was coming into this draft. But talk to me about the benefit of having elite coverage and what that does for a pass rush.
Yeah, it's a big thing. I would estimate and I'm spitballing here, but I would estimate that 30% of the sacks I see, probably 40% of the pressures, are derived first from coverage and then from pass rush. By that I mean the quarterback is looking around and he can't. That guy is crap. And then there's the pressure. So sometimes, especially in today's NFL, and the other thing Witherspoon does very well is quick game. In today's NFL, there's so much quick game. If you can't press your receiver, you're in trouble.
Yes.
Because
so true.
The ball's coming out so quickly. If you can't disrupt that route, you're just going to give stuff up over and over and over.
Tom Brady and Drew Brees changed everything when it came to the timing of passing offenses in the NFL.
And the next guy we're going to talk about is a receiver who exploited that quite brilliantly, and will do so also.
Yeah. I can't wait to do that. One. I do want to ask you one more question before we move on from Witherspoon.
Yeah, with Witherspoon, he can press and disrupt the routes. He can take a guy anywhere he needs to take him. So he can create pressure with his ability to disrupt and take the quarterback out of his head. And oh crap, that little split second where you have it or you don't. And it's not a thought, it's a reaction. That's how quick it has to be. Witherspoon can eliminate a lot of those things. So in that 30 to 40% realm, and now I want to like chart a bunch of stuff and see like how accurate that is. That'd be an interesting article.
Yeah, I would read that for sure.
Yeah. That sort of thing he's great at. So he will create pressure in coverage. He is that type of guy. In the same way that Deonte Banks, who went to the Giants, or Joey Porter Jr., who went to the Steelers, will just envelop you. He can also do that.
If Witherspoon is as good, let's say he's 90% as good as you and I think that he is, do the Seahawks have potentially the best secondary in the NFL?
Could be. Yeah. I think Love, the Giants safety, they're going to do more too high. Mm-hmm. It's going to be more too high. And I think that the lack of an interior defensive lineman, I think maybe this is the year they can go full metal Fangio like they wanted to last year and just kind of didn't have the personnel to do it. Now they kind of do. They bring Bobby back. He can sort of set the tone for everyone. He can be the shot caller as he was and as Cam was. I don't know if they had a shot caller last year. It was kind of a, oh, let's go do this. Best secondary, I mean, certainly the most oppressive. I have no question about the top four. I don't know, where and what with Jamal Adams, but
of course.
I'm not sort of counting Jamal Adams in my head. If they want to run a bunch of too high, which is the kryptonite for any quarterback right now, including Justin Herbert, who's better at it than anyone else. This year they have the guys to do that. They're not trying to patch it together. And the other interesting thing about this, I mean, you go back to the LOB, Sherm never really had that kind of bookend.
That's true. They rotated on the other side. They had Brandon Browner for a little bit, and then they had Darrell Simon. They threw a bunch of guys.
Byron Maxwell.
Byron Maxwell. That's the guy I was thinking
and Byron
of. Yeah.
Maxwell was good, but he wasn't
with the sleeves.
It wasn't this.
Yeah.
So it's potentially LOB. I don't know. It's different. It's modern. It's more modern. It's not cover 3 or bust. It's, it allows him to do a lot of interesting things under Clint Hurtt that maybe they couldn't, maybe they wanted to do last year, but they just couldn't. So they get Love, they get Witherspoon. Well, you're altering half of your secondary in a really positive direction. So that's kind of
and one last thought on that. I heard a interview with KJ Wright yesterday, who was saying the plan last year, and certainly the plan this year for Jamal Adams, was he was calling him the fulcrum of the defense, and that by bringing in Love, that is not a replacement for Jamal Adams, although he could be if necessary. It is going to free Jamal Adams up to do what he does best and take him out of deep coverage and essentially make him a free range hitter. And that's a really exciting prospect, especially given how thin Seattle is at off-ball linebacker. You can almost make Jamal Adams kind of that death backer type player where, yes, he can cover a bit if you need him to, but he's in there to go get the ball, which is something that he's always been exceptional at.
Still makes you wonder why you give up 2 first-round picks for a central.
It does. I don't know that they're ever going to justify that, but you know
they're
what?
Not. I mean, they're really. I admire them for trying as hard as they are. But
sure, of course. All right. So you teased this next guy a little while ago, and I want to dig in because with their second pick of the first round, the Seahawks selected Jaxon Smith-Njigba, the incredibly productive receiver from Ohio State. Yes. And in our final show before the draft, I actually mocked him to Seattle at 20 because, one, he was probably my second favorite player in this entire draft, and because I think he has the opportunity to do 2 things simultaneously. One, he can give the Seahawks arguably the toughest receiving core to cover in the league, and 2, he provides a contingency plan for Tyler Lockett. So Tell me about your thoughts on the player and on the fit in Seattle.
He was my obvious. Well, was Carter your favorite?
Anthony Richardson.
Oh, okay, cool. I love Richardson. And he went to the perfect place, right?
He did. I know. If he wasn't going to come to Seattle, I'm glad he's in the AFC, and I'm glad he's with Indy.
He's going to run that Jalen.
Oh my gosh!
He's going to run that actual. I was talking to Greg because I have a podcast with Greg Cosell, and we were talking about that. Like, well, Richardson needs to run the Eagles' offense. We said that pre-draft, and after the draft, like, well, okay, now he is. Yeah, Smith-Njigba would have been top 10 with a fully healthy season. I don't think there's any question about that. Mm-hmm. He was my receiver 2. My receiver 1 was Zay Flowers because
God, I love Zay Flowers.
Zay Flowers not only did a bunch of ridiculous stuff, but did you see those quarterbacks?
Oh, I mean,
I give receivers a bump when they have to deal with bad quarterbacks, and Zay Flowers looked like an NFL guy. Who was my comp for Zay Flowers? Oh, T.Y.
Hilton is perfect.
He was T.Y. Hilton with like Division II quarterback play. So he was going to be my receiver 1. And now he's got Lamar Jackson throwing him the ball. So good for him.
The amount of yards left off the stat sheet.
Oh my God. It was
like Flowers.
When I watched Kyle Pitts and I had to watch Kyle Trask.
Right.
Same thing.
Yeah.
Like how much helium. I could feel my voice rising with all the helium balls. So Smith-Njigba, let's see. These are all 2021 stats. So interesting thing about him, 562 snaps in the slot, 80 out wide, 2 in line, 1 in the backfield. In the tape piece I did, the top 8 receivers, I really went out of my way to pick examples of him winning outside because I think he's more of an outside receiver than people are letting on. And the first 3, when I did strengths, I had 3 plays in which he won, 3 positive plays, and they were all from the outside. So I know that Carroll and Schneider and Shane Waldron would prefer that their receivers be interchangeable. With Smith-Njigba, you hear slot, slot, slot. And you can kind of get that beaten into your head to the point where you think he's nothing else or very little else. I don't think that's the case. I think he can win outside just fine. If he's 50% outside.
Well, that was one of the things I was going to ask you, because one thing with the Shane Waldron offense, it's actually really nice to see. You know, I felt like with Schottenheimer and Bevel, you had pretty static pre-snap formations in Seattle.
You think?
To put it gently. And
3 routes. Cool.
And that's exactly it. And, you know, they did not hesitate to move DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett all over the formation last year.
They were a really good motion team last year, and I'm a motion. I just won't shut up about it. So
yeah, I'm with you. Absolutely. Anything. I mean, I think the ability to disguise intention is maybe the most underrated aspect of football. And now with Jaxon Smith-Njigba, I mean, there's no tells. If he really can win outside at the NFL level, there are no tells on this offense.
Seattle had the 10th fewest dropbacks with 3 receivers last year, 413. Ravens had the fewest, of course, with 123.
Jeez.
80 fewer than anybody else.
Holy cow.
Because that's who they are. Bengals had the most, of course, because they have those 3 receivers. Right. So back to my Smith-Njigba.
So that's the question, because
he's well, my comparison for him is Cooper Kupp. And then I guess, you told me that he compared himself to Cooper Kupp.
He did. Yeah, it's funny because when we had Davis Sue on during the draft, I said he reminded me of Stephon Diggs. You say Cooper Kupp. And then in his presser after the draft, JSN compared himself to a mix of Cooper Kupp and Stephon Diggs. So you and I had it, man.
The Rams stole Kupp in the 3rd round of the 2017 draft out of Eastern Washington. Kupp made it clear pretty quickly he was going to define Sean McVay's passing game, regardless of the quarterback, with his route precision, his awareness of defenders around him, and his ability to move away from them despite decent but not amazing straight speed. And that's what really got me into the Kupp comparison, because Smith-Njigba, he's got like everything else, but he's not a burner. He's not going to run away from you.
Right.
He's just going to make it miserable. Like your day is going to suck if you have to cover him, because he's so exacting with his routes.
He's open by the time the snap hits the quarterback's hands.
And his foot movement at the line of scrimmage is just preposterous. So when we were talking about disrupting receivers at the line of scrimmage, and I remember when I was writing up Devontae Smith, and can a guy this small make it in the NFL? And I pointed to his foot movement at the line of scrimmage. Like, well, he's going to dry up and blow away if you get your hands on him. Okay, yeah, go put your hands on him.
Right.
Okay.
Right. Well, having an 83-inch wingspan.
Cigar thought cigar while you try to do that, and let us know how that goes for you.
That's right.
Yeah. So a few of my notes as far as excellent sense of how to work zone coverage, whether he's inside or outside, he'll find open space. He's especially effective with this in bunches and stacks, where defenders have to take that extra millisecond to discern where he's going. That millisecond is all he needs. You don't want to get fooled by his feet because if he turns you around, it's all over. He's too quick to allow defenders to recover from missteps most of the time. Angular expert who can just eat up press and do the same to off coverage corners when they come up to deal with him. He can also easily extrapolate those skills to gain yards after the catch. So really, he's NFL ready.
Well, that I think is I think Zay Flowers maybe
we're not
the
going
most.
to have any when DK Metcalf can't run routes. We're not going to have
no man, not at all. And look, I don't like to do a lot of helmet scouting, but when you have a program with a pedigree at a certain position, and Ohio State has that at wide receiver, Alabama kind of took over for LSU in that regard, and now Ohio State has taken that from Alabama in terms of just churning out lottery picks at the position. And they run a pro style offense where they're running professional routes, and
they're running. I've seen the playbook. It's option routes, over and over.
Which is like high level wide receiver play because we had Michael Bumpus on during the draft as well, and he talked about how you have to have a plan B. And you have to understand how to weave that plan B in with what the quarterback wants to do. And it takes a really high level of skill and wide receiver acumen to be able to run option routes and know that you're going to be on the same page with the quarterback.
This drove me nuts when people were saying that Justin Fields was slow processing. No, he's waiting for the option route to break. That's what's going on here. A couple of dings, small dings, very small. Smith-Njigba can get on top of receivers with his route awareness and movement skills. He doesn't have the kind of pure burner speed that will allow him to consistently get and keep away from those defenders in a straight line at the second and third levels. At his size,
good thing they have DK Metcalf,
who can just blow your face up. At his size, he's not going to break tackles with pure power. He's an exploiter and creator of open space, as opposed to a bigger guy who's just going to crash into people for extra gains. Again, good thing they have DK Metcalf. So,
you know who your notes remind me of? Amon-Ra St. Brown.
Yes, I can totally see that. Very much so. Very much so. Yes.
I mean, Amon-Ra St. Brown isn't.
I like that comp just as much as Cooper Kupp, actually, the more I think about it. Yeah, sure. and Amon-Ra St. Brown, he pretty much defines their passing game. He's another guy like Kupp who will come in and, he's not the biggest, he's not the fastest, and he's not this, and he's not that. Yeah, and within 1 or 2 years, he's like your number one receiver.
Yeah, because he was second fiddle to Robert Woods in everyone's mind, and Brandon Cooks, I think, before that. And it was just kind of like, he's going to be the second option here. And pretty soon, I mean, it's kind of Tyler Lockett-esque, and it's like, okay,
yes,
well, it's DK's the one. And I mean, he is, but then you look at the stats at the end of the year, and it's Lockett at the top every time.
I almost think DK is a better 2. I think he makes more sense as a 2.
T. Higgins-esque in that way.
Very well. Quentin Johnston, who went to the Chargers, I compared to T. Higgins. I think he's a better 2. Those bigger guys are usually better 2s in the NFL because you need a guy like this. So they got a 1, and they got a 1 pick before Quentin Johnston went to the Chargers. I mean he's a 1 who's going
to start out as their 3. That is scary.
I don't think that getting Devin Witherspoon at 5 is any sort of that's where he should have gone. If anything, it's a bit of a steal. I think getting Smith-Njigba at 20 because of the only thing I think is the abbreviated season due to injury. Other than that, he's top 10. He's top 8.
Well, yeah, coming off that Rose Bowl his sophomore year, they're talking about, is he going to be a top 3 pick?
Yeah. This fully healthy season, he might have even eclipsed Flowers, even though his quarterback was my favorite quarterback in this class.
Yeah.
At a certain point, it doesn't matter. The guy's just ridiculous. So yeah, he's great. He's immediate. He is immediate on your team.
Oh my gosh. I want to get into these day 2 picks, but look, I don't mean to sound repetitive or like a homer here, but does the addition of JSN give the Seahawks the best collection of 3 receivers in this league right now?
They don't have a Jamar Chase.
Fair. Just the top end talent of Chase puts him over.
Yeah. Jamar
That's
Chase
fair.
is
That's fair.
Alien who
Jamar Chase might be Jerry Rice.
T. Higgins would be receiver 1 on like 20 teams. Tyler Boyd is spectacular. But what is the NFL now? It's all about creating and stopping explosive plays. If you have a top 5 receiver group and a top 5 secondary, as long as you're not screwing everything else up everywhere, you've got a chance to go to a Super Bowl.
Man, that is exciting.
It helps if you have a top 5 receiver group and your quarterback doesn't stink and they're fine there. So
yeah. I mean, we're going to see what they can do in the trenches because, they kind of eschewed the top end talent in this draft and outside of Draymond Jones in free agency as well. But starting at the top of day 2,
really isn't an inside guy.
No, he really isn't.
Even if he plays inside, he's really more. He's an edge guy. He's not like I almost wish they could take Anthony Bradford like at the reverse Tom Cable. Like I think he would be a great nose tackle. Let's just move him over there. See what we could do.
Yeah, maybe they do that. Maybe they do that.
Have to pass protect, which is probably a good thing.
Yeah, right. Well, we're going to talk about Bradford too, but at the top of
game, man, oh boy.
Yeah. But at the top of day 2, they took Derek Hall, and admittedly, neither Mike or I saw this coming. Hall was on my radar a little bit, but I had been operating under the assumption that they would have addressed D-line in the first round. And I knew Hall was probably a second round guy, so I didn't dig into him a lot. But instead of doing that, they waited until pick 37. They selected this very speedy edge rusher out of Auburn with like almost historical quickness. His 10-yard split is 98th percentile.
Yep.
And
it's on this guy. His ass is coming out of a cannon on every play.
It's crazy. And I want to make one note on that before turning you loose on him, because I'm super curious to learn more about him through you. But a lot of times when you see these smaller edge rushers, a big guy gets their hands on him and it's kind of over. They have to beat you with speed. But he's so good at knowing how to transfer his speed into power. And when I'm watching his tape,
that's my first note.
Okay. And, I'm watching his tape, and so many of his tackles for loss came by going right through offensive tackles.
He does 2 things incredibly well. He will get both hands on your numbers and just push you back. And he's got that Von Miller long arm. One of his sacks came that way, where he'll just extend his arm and then use his upper body leverage and speed to power to push you into the quarterback. So my notes on Hall. Let's see, 8 sacks, 47 pressures, 35 stops last season. I always struggle, like, how does he project? Because and Hall's hand movement, I wouldn't say his technique is like elevated. It might take him a year to really click. High-waisted player who plays best in a 2-point stance, wide off the edge, primary move, speed to power, where he'll get his hands inside the blocker's numbers and just move him back. Can take guys 50 pounds heavier right off their feet. He had a sack against Alabama where he took their right tackle and just like undressed him with that. The guy was like ass over tea kettle. What the hell is happening? This guy is just killing me. Impressive play strength for his size, 6'3", 264. He hits like he's 280. Uses his long arms, 84th percentile, to separate and dislodge from blocks. Has a Von Miller style long arm that can be deadly. Has to work on his hand movement and elevated techniques. Has an embryonic inside counter that can be developed. No spin to speak of. Bend around the edge to a point, though it's more of a dip under the tackle than it's like a dip and rip or a motorcycle lean, that sort of DeMarcus Ware thing. Plays with his hair on fire at all times, but has a good sense of redirection when he needs to do it. Definitely an outside guy as opposed to someone you could move around the line. He's not... I said of Boye Mafe last year, I'd love to see him play inside more. That's not Derek Hall. You want him outside.
Got it.
He will get eaten up inside.
Does that move Mafe inside, do you think, now?
I don't know. I mean, they really have... Well, let's see. They got Derek Taylor. They got Owosu. They've got Mafe. They've got Hall.
And Jaron Reed. That's about it.
If they want to run some 5-man stuff, if they want to run some 6-1, some weird NASCAR things, maybe. I don't know. But I like Derek Hall. I think you need to know what he is and where he can develop. He's never going to be that twitchy Nolan Smith, BJ Ojolari, guy, but those guys are 20 pounds lighter. And they're not going to be that powerful. Although Nolan Smith almost is, which is why I'm kind of...
Yeah, he's a freak, man.
He went at 30. Woo. At some point, the NFL is going to have to investigate Howie Roseman and how he keeps getting away.
It's wild, man. It is so wild. It's just, I mean, let's just, we got to do it. 90 seconds on the Eagles, man, because they're the blueprint right now.
I don't think Roseman's doing anything. I'm now reading the other GMs are tired of all the praise he's getting. Well, do your job better, guys. I don't think Howie's doing anything unusual. He's just doing everything right. He is counting cards. He's beating the casino. And there are ways to do that. There are methods to do that. Proven methods.
Is the way to do that just draft everyone from the best defense in college football from the last 20 years?
Well, yeah, and look what the Steelers did. Look what the other Pennsylvania team did. They took everyone from, everyone really good from Georgia's offense.
Yep.
He's got his methodology. He's never going to spend heavy on running backs. He's never going to spend heavy on linebackers. He got DeAndre Swift for I think it was a 4th-round pick.
4th rounder.
And I was reading that if they let him go after this year, the compensatory pick would probably be a 4th-rounder. So they got him for nothing.
Free year of DeAndre Swift.
Howie just has it. He has it down in his head. He understands his methodology. He understands what will work for him and for his team. And he's not an alien. He's not coming from outer space with some hidden,
right.
Aaron Rodgers vision quest thing that no one else has.
It's like how the Ravens drafted for years. It was just like whenever it was their turn to pick, they just did the right thing. They never got cute. They were super picky with when they traded up.
Undervalued assets. Jalen Carter went at 9. They traded up for Jalen Carter. Now, if 20 GMs did that, we'd be crucifying them. But because it's Howie, it's like how Belichick got the benefit of the doubt for a long time. Carroll and Schneider got the benefit of the doubt for a long time.
Yes, they did.
Right now, Howie's that guy, and justifiably so.
Yeah. All right, so at 52, the Seahawks made their most controversial pick of the draft. They selected Zach Charbonnet, the running back from UCLA. Now, I say controversial because there are a lot of people out there who think, that's right, there's no such thing as a running back that's worthy of a 2nd-round pick. And many of those folks, they still feel that way, even after seeing what Ken Walker did last season. I don't necessarily share that opinion, but back-to-back 2nd-round picks on the position is a pretty big swing, given their deficiencies elsewhere, right? So tell me your thoughts on the value of taking running back there, just kind of writ large, and then tell us how you feel about the player himself.
It really depends. I mean, people are talking a lot about the Lions and how they took Jahmyr Gibbs, the 12th pick, and what a reach that is for a running back. Well, they don't view Jahmyr Gibbs as a running back. They view him as an offensive weapon. The Falcons took Bijan Robinson, who in my mind is the best running back prospect since Adrian Peterson. With the 8th pick, they don't view him as a running back. They view him as an offensive weapon. I think with Walker and Charbonnet, they view them as running backs, but it's like this two-headed monster because they've been trying to, Chris Carson had injuries and, they've tried it with all sorts of guys since Marshawn Lynch, including zombie Marshawn Lynch for a while. They hit it right with Ken Walker, but Ken Walker is a certain type of back. I comped him to Melvin Gordon. He's a slasher. He's a quick guy. He's not a receiver. He's not a blocker. Charbonnet is 6 foot 214, only 52nd percentile weight, but he doesn't play that way.
That's not how he plays.
806 of his 1358 rushing yards came after contact last season.
Sheesh.
And he averaged 4.15 yards after contact per rushing attempt. I'll give you my notes on him real quick, and then we'll get to the NFL comp, which I think you guys will like as your listeners. At his best, Charbonnet comes to the field with vision, contact balance, and acceleration in a package that projects him very well to the NFL as a feature back. Lateral speed to bounce it outside. His lateral speed is an underrated thing. Averaged 6.9 yards per attempt on 92 runs charted to the outside or off tackle last season. 6.9 yards per attempt. That's an offensive weapon. He has the ability to reset in space to bring that contact balance into play, which can be a problem for defenders at the 2nd and 3rd level. This attribute, especially for his size, he chews up turf from an agility perspective like a guy 2 or 3 inches shorter. He's a good receiver on swing passes and screens. The kid they got in the 7th round from Georgia is a much better receiver.
Yeah, I think he's the new Travis Homer. Get ready, Mike. I think Kenny McIntosh is the new Travis Homer.
Oh, baby. Ring the bells, light the pyres.
I think Charbonnet is perfectly adequate with swings and screens. I've heard him as an asset in the receiving game. There's some ugly reps on release routes, but Needs a little work.
He'll catch it if you throw it to him, though.
He'll catch it if you throw it to him, but you better throw it to him.
Yeah.
There's a lot of radius there. It better be between the 2 and the 4. If you're a shot caller, this is my conclusion. If you're a shot caller for an NFL team in need of an old school hammerhead who can blow through tackles and also present some speed and wiggle, Charbonnet could well be your guy. He may struggle at first for an every down role at the next level, which you will not need here because he's not going to be the every down guy. Due to some limitations at this point in his process, but the stuff that works is valuable and it works right now. My NFL comparison, Marshawn Lynch.
Stop it.
Selected with the 12th overall pick in the 2007 draft, it was a different era by the Bills. Lynch had a few good seasons with his first NFL team, exploded into the scene pretty quickly after the Seahawks traded for him in the 2010 season. Lynch was a broken tackle machine, as you know from his marquee runs over time, but he also presented tremendous lateral agility and became the epicenter of Seattle's offense for a time, despite a relative lack of home run speed, which he really didn't have, and not a ton of value as a receiver. It's the combination of contact power and lateral agility. Maybe the 24 got in my head and I just went there. But there are a lot of characteristics of Charbonnet's style that remind me of Lynch.
The way he runs, one of the things that I really look for, of course, contact balance, right? Everyone wants a running back with great contact balance. Zach Charbonnet has that. Ken Walker has that in spades. But I look for Velcro feet. And when Zach Charbonnet's feet hit the ground, there's no slippage. There's no double clutching with his feet.
He is incredibly efficient with his feet.
And look, we're throwing out some lofty names here today, but stylistically, I'm not saying talent-wise because the guy I'm about to mention is an alien. But style-wise, Zach Charbonnet runs with the grippy feet that you see from Nick Chubb.
Yes, I could see that. Another 24, right?
Yeah, another 24. So let me ask you this.
Now he's not going to wear 24.
No, I don't think so.
That's too much.
I don't think so.
I can see that. He doesn't have Chubb's power, but
no, and no one does. I mean, Chubb.
I can see what you're talking about. The grippy feet, the Velcro feet. Yeah, I could see that.
Yeah. So
which Marshawn also had. Once Marshawn put his ankle in it, you were done.
Yes, it's so true. And Marshawn had that unique running style where his feet were so wide too.
Yeah.
But
it was almost crab-like, and
right. So here's kind of what I'm thinking. There a lot of the commentary that I heard immediately after the draft, and look, fantasy football analysis has bled into real football analysis, and it's helped grow the game. I don't have a problem with that, but I think that has influenced the conversation around Seattle's 2 newest running backs. Speaking of Walker and Charbonnet, is okay, well, maybe Walker's the first and second down back, and Charbonnet's the third down / hurry up guy. And, I don't see that necessarily. I think what Pete Carroll values is fresh legs at the position. And so the more I think about it, I see it.
The thing about it being that segmented, if you do it in a way that's segmented, well, opposing teams know.
They know exactly what you're doing.
You're basically, you're telling your plays.
Yeah, I wonder if it's not going to be more of like alternating drives the way that Green Bay has with Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon, or that the Panthers used to do with Jonathan Stewart, D'Angelo Williams.
We're giving you 20 carries. We're giving you 10 based on this opponent. We're playing Chargers who can't defend the run for bat turds, to quote Tanner Boyle. So we're going to, now it's Charbonnet because we want to really exploit that up the middle. Just depends. We're playing the Buccaneers. We don't want Charbonnet going up against Vita Vea and now Kalijah Cansey. My God. I pictured Arnold and DeVito in Twins, though.
Yeah. Right.
It was like when Brian Burns met Bryce Young, that sort of thing. But
yeah.
So when Vita Vea is in there, you do not run up the middle. So maybe we want Ken Walker. Maybe it's situational, not for our offense, but against the defense.
Well, that was going to be my next question.
To me, it strikes me as that's more of what it is when you have a running back rotation. It's not we're going to set up our plays with this particular back. It's we're playing this team, so now we have these different options. I was talking to Greg Cosell, who I have the podcast with. This is right before the draft. We were talking about running backs in general. And I said, the fact that there aren't these bell cow backs now, it allows offensive coordinators to be more creative with their backs and deploy them as weapons as opposed to every down guys. And who cares? Who cares?
Right. Yeah, well, and I look back at Pete Carroll's days in USC. When Carroll was at USC, he over-recruited running back. I remember one year, I mentioned it on the show, he had 10 first-team All-State running backs on his roster at one time, and the best offense he ever had was with Reggie Bush and Lendale White. And yes, Lendale White was more of a hammer and Reggie Bush was a do-it-all type of guy, but they would alternate entire drives. There wasn't one thing that they didn't trust either of those two guys to do. And I think that's something that Pete Carroll values a lot. The other thing is, and this is sort of speaking to trying to understand the process between or behind taking Charbonnet here after taking Walker high last year, is I think there was a teardrop after Charbonnet at the position. You know, a lot of people had Charbonnet as the number 2 running back in this class. And after that, I thought there was a pretty big drop to the Kendre Millers and the Tyjae Spears, Roschon Johnson, Devon Achane, who's a totally different type of running back. And so it could have just been an opportunity cost thing here too.
Right. He went to Miami, of course he did.
Yeah, of course.
You track teams, so of course you get a literal Olympic level track.
He's going to be very fun there.
It's stupid. Charbonnet was my RB3 behind Bijan and Jahmyr Gibbs.
Yeah.
And he wasn't that far behind Jahmyr Gibbs. He's a totally different back.
Would you say that there was a drop-off in your rankings after Charbonnet?
Who did I have at 4? I had Tyjae Spears at 4. I would say there was. Tyjae Spears, then Achane, then Roschon Johnson from Texas, who, you know, the Bears got him in like the 3rd round. Roschon Johnson is a legitimate starting running back. Just he was behind.
Dude, I thought he might end up being Seattle's new Chris Carson.
Yeah, I could have seen that. And then Dwayne Bride from UAB, very good player who just needs to stop fumbling.
Sure.
That's always good advice. Stop fumbling. If you're fumbling, stop. RB3, power running back 2 behind a guy who is literally generational. Best running back prospect I've seen, as I said, since Adrian Peterson. So
wild.
Yeah, he could. What I have this little. Apparently, I get all these got these DMs in the last week. Well, Doug, you hit it on Javonte Williams and you hit it on Dameon Pierce. Who's the guy this year? I'm telling you, that's the guy.
Really? Okay. For
fantasy, I don't know.
Well, sure.
But, you know.
We'll let the fantasy guys chop that up. But, man, I get it. I get it. You know, I don't have a problem with using a top 50 pick on a running back. I really don't. If you think that he's special, like, you can't honestly watch the Seahawks for the last 6 years and look at their offense when they have a healthy, really good running back on the field versus when they don't and say that they don't matter. They may not matter to other teams as much, but they matter to Seattle. When they were having to push DJ Dallas and Travis Homer out there as the main running backs, that offense didn't go anywhere. When Ken Walker was fighting through an ankle injury through the second half of last year, the offense wasn't doing shit. And so it's like, there just is value, at least to Seattle, in having a good running back. And I just believe in taking good players with top 50 picks. And I think Charbonnet is that.
If you look at the offense started to stagger a little bit, and it was partly that, and it was partly Cross and Lucas kind of regressing, or, you know, but having that kind of running back makes things so much easier on your offensive line, where you're not having to do it all every play.
Sure.
And I would say that by taking a receiver at 20, I think Pete's earned some goodwill as far as taking a running back in the 2nd round.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm with you, man. I certainly understand the quibble with the pick. I don't understand the outrage, but there was opportunity cost with taking a running back there with a lot of good interior players on the board. And you know what? They used day 3 to hammer that. I mean, once you got to round 4, that's when they got to work in the trenches. They used their next 4 picks to draft 1,200 pounds worth of linemen. And that started at pick 108 with another player that I mocked to Seattle on our show, guard Anthony Bradford out of LSU. That was followed by defensive tackle Cameron Young out of Mississippi State. After that, it was defensive end Mike Morris from Michigan and center Olu Oluwatimi, also from Michigan. And then they finished their picks with Jarek Reed, a corner out of New Mexico, and Kenny McIntosh, who you mentioned earlier, running back from Georgia, more of a satellite back type guy. Taken as a whole, and keeping in mind what Seattle did on the first 2 days of the draft, how do you feel about this group, and which of these 6 guys stand out to you the most?
Before I do that, I want to chop this up for a second. I'm going to list 10 players for you who were taken right after Charbonnet. You tell me if you would have taken any of these players.
All right, let's do it. We're in the fire, baby. Let's do it.
Javon Dexter Sr., defensive tackle, Florida. Tui Pelotu, edge, USC. Rashee Rice, receiver, SMU. Tyreek Stevenson, cornerback, Miami. John Michael Schmidt, center, Minnesota. I would have taken him.
Schmidt.
I would have taken him.
That's the first one that I can say definitively.
He's
yes.
Alex Mack. I love him.
Yeah.
Luke Schoonmaker, tight end, Michigan. Osiris Torrance, guard, Florida.
Maybe.
Maybe. DJ Turner, cornerback, Michigan. Brenton Strange, tight end, Penn State. Juice Scruggs, center, Penn State. I didn't like his tip at all. Colossal reach for the Texans. Marvin Mims Jr., receiver, Oklahoma. That's the end of the second round. Outside of John Michael Schmitz, there isn't a player on that list I would have taken above Zach Charbonnet.
Yep. And I think there's a lot of Creed Humphrey redux there too.
You also have to look at where the board sits. Now, the guys before him, Cam Smith, Jaden Reed, Keanu Benton, Cody Mauch, Jartarius Martin.
Oh, they were taking Benton if he was there. Benton if he was there.
Keon White, who, oh my God, in this defense, I love him. Brian Branch, how the hell Brian Branch lasted until the second round, I don't know. I would have taken him 14th in the first round. Joe Tippmann, who I thought was like a center 4, and how Luke Whippler lasted until the 7th round. That was weird.
That was weird. There had to be something going on there.
But so you also have, being outraged over Charbonnet in the abstract is okay, I guess, but you have to look at where things sit. I named off like 11 or 12 players there, and there's one guy I would have taken before him, and he's a center. So,
And if we weren't so snake bitten by D. Eskridge over Creed Humphrey, we might not be as upset about it.
Well, again, that was when they were drafting for God knows what.
Right.
We have to separate ourselves from the traumatic past.
Yes, we do. And it sounds like that's what Seattle's doing.
Yeah. So let's see. Draft grades. A+.
Hey, I like that. How many of those did you give out this year?
2.
Philly, the other one?
Yep. That's it.
Love that.
I tend to grade pretty generously because, unless it's the Packers, I did not like at all.
Sure.
Because you have to like Lucas Van Ness, and I just didn't get it. He was my edge 8. But I said, I could be wrong about him like I was wrong about Karl Aftis last year because he's the same type of guy. Sure. And I just don't like I thought Keon White was a better version of Lucas Van Ness than Lucas Van Ness was. But so I grade generously. If somebody takes a player high that I really didn't like I give the Saints a D- last year because they took Trevor Penning in the first round. By the way, Howie Roseman turned Trevor Penning into Jalen Carter.
Fuck out of here.
Get the fuck out of here. He turned Trevor Penning.
So good, man. It's so good.
Just stop.
I know it. And it's crazy. And, one of my favorite players in the NFL is Jalen Hurts. And Jalen Hurts deserves so much credit for allowing the Eagles to draft how they did because they loaded up on draft capital and there was so much talk about, if Jalen Hurts isn't the guy, then they package these picks and they move up and they take a quarterback. And they believed in Jalen Hurts. They built around him. They traded for A.J. Brown. And that allowed them to keep all of these other picks to really just strengthen a roster that I think is already maybe the best in the NFL.
The thing about Hurts is they didn't ask him to do a bunch of stuff he wasn't good at.
Right.
And the thing about that sort of offense where he's not a system quarterback. He's the system. Everything revolves around him. And you force the defense to do certain things that make those first reads and second reads open, which is something he's still kind of learning to do. It was kind of like what the Seahawks did with Russ early.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
So yeah, Seattle gets an A+ for me.
That's great. Was there a one specific guy on day 3 that kind of helped solidify that for you, or one of those 6 guys that they took rounds 4 through 7 that you really like?
I like Kenny McIntosh a lot, and it's for his size, I think he has some power, and he's a really good receiver. And I think Waldron's going to find ways to get him on the field just for that, because I know he wants to expand that game. And I don't know if, like I said, I don't know if Charbonnet is really that guy. Kenny McIntosh is. So he's that, DJ Dallas. Dun, dun, dun.
Well, I mean, he's got the juice. There's no question about that. You also mentioned a little earlier in the show, you mentioned Anthony Bradford, the guard out of LSU.
Yeah. I'll give you my notes that I have. 6'4", 332, very large individual who can absolutely demolish people in the run game. Pass pro is more in question. Allowed 4 sacks and 12 pressures last season. He's late to pick up stunts in games. Pass rushers will bounce right off him to the quarterback when he's late with his hands. If he gets his hands on you, you're done. But that doesn't happen enough. He's kind of this big, slightly unformed guy who just stands in the middle of the field and eats people. But if you get outside of his radius, then things can get weird. You can cross his face. Stunts are a problem. I think he's a developmental guy.
Okay, so maybe not a day one starter.
I don't think so.
Okay.
Well, the NFL is becoming so much more stunt heavy. I noticed that when I was watching tape last year. There's so many more twists in games, especially inside. It's why those Wisconsin center. I have so many names in my head; it's hard. Anytime he had one of these to deal with, it didn't work well for him. I think Bradford struggles with that too.
Gotcha. Yeah. No, I mean that makes sense, and unfortunately, that's not a position Seattle has the luxury of taking their time to develop as it stands right now. So hopefully they can get him coached up quick.
Yeah, the Michigan center I've watched a little bit. I have to be honest. I have not watched the third day guys. No,
it's still early in the post draft process. I totally understand.
Be authoritative. I can't fake it, so I can't really say.
No, man. I appreciate you not BSing us. We'll definitely be following your coverage to learn more about these guys as it goes. And listen, Doug, I know that this is peak season for you, and we want to let you get back to everything you got to do. But man, it is always awesome to have you on this show. Thank you for coming in.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you so much.
Of course, man. And as we get out of here, where can the folks listening find more of you? And talk about your book too, because that book rules.
Oh, thank you. The Genius of Desperation. It's now 5 years old. My God. And it is a chronological schematic history of the NFL from the wing T to the RPO. As far as where I'm doing stuff online, a lot of it, touchdownwire.usatoday.com.
Okay. All right. You've got your marching orders, people. Make sure you're following Doug. Get more of the insight that he has given to us today.
It's a pretty nice day outside. Get a cigar and go outside and read the book.
That's right, baby. That's right. Grab a Cigar Thoughts stogie. Grab the Genius of Desperation. Make an afternoon out of it. Man, that sounds like a perfect day to me.
That's living right.
Yeah, that's living, baby. That's living. You can also find Mike and I on social media as well. I am on Twitter at @JacksonBevins. That's JACSON. Remember that no K is okay when spelling my name. Mike is on Twitter at Mike Barwin, and the show itself is at Cigar Thoughts. You can also find us on Instagram at Cigar Thoughts NFL, on TikTok at Cigar Thoughts, on YouTube at Cigar Thoughts, and on Facebook at Seahawks Cigar Thoughts. Of course, you can listen to this show and read every article at fieldgoals.com/Cigar Thoughts. And if you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts and you like the show, drop us a 5-star rating and leave a quick review. And when you buy those cigars, hit us up on Twitter or Instagram with a pic and tell us what you think. Remember, you can get those at cigarthoughtsnfl.com or just click the links on the show page. Thank you to all of y'all listening for your continued support of this show. We know you've only got so much time for podcasts in your life, and it's an honor to be a part of that for y'all. Please know that by sharing this show on social media and with your friends, you give us the juice to keep making it happen. We will be back soon, but in the meantime, onwards and upwards, my friends.